It's good to see you all. I missed you guys last week. I was out, and I know Sharon covered and did a great job. But I'm glad to be back with you guys as we continue on in Genesis. We are over the halfway mark. Whew, this is a long book. This is a long book. I was talking to my parents, I was talking to some other people, and they're like, just tell them about all the things I was teaching. My parents know what I'm teaching because my mom watches what I teach, which means I have to watch what I say. And but I was like, 50 chapters is a lot, especially when you condense it down into 18 weeks and you're trying to do like 4 or 5 chapters sometimes. Today we only have 3. Which feels like a relief after the past few weeks. So anyways, only 3 chapters. We're in 31, 32, 33. This is, and will be, we'll see, the end of Jacob's interactions with Laban. Praise God. That has been a rough and tumultuous road and full of twists and turns and deception, right and left. So we're going to end Jacob's relationship with Laban and kind of move on to another period of the story. He's going to be reunited with Esau, so we'll have to see how some of the family tension plays out with that. This is, in many ways, does anyone in here watch The Bear? Okay, so you watch The Bear. Okay, that means I got to think of another illustration because only one person's going to get it. So I'll explain the illustration to you, then we'll pray, and then we'll get started. There's an episode in the first season of The Bear, I think it's the first or second season, where they are having this family who is rife with issues, okay, like rife with issues, relationally, interpersonally, personally, just bad, right? And they have a family meal, and it goes very poorly. I have never felt, I like a scary movie, I like a horror movie. I've never felt the anxiety that I felt watching that episode of The Bear as I felt like when I watched like Friday the 13th or something, right? Does not even compare, because in the backs of our minds, we know that like Michael Myers and Jason, Edward Scissorhands don't exist. Not Edward Scissorhands, Freddy Krueger. They both have weird fingers. It was just Halloween, y'all. My brain's all messed up. We know that they don't exist, but we know that actual real family drama does exist. And so when you sit down in that, you're just like, oh. And when you're observing other people's, it's really uncomfortable. And so we're just going to continue to see family drama over and over and over again. So let me pray, and then we'll look at chapter 31, where we will enter into more family drama. Lord, thank you so much for bringing us together today. Would you help us as we look at these 3 chapters of Genesis and as we see your story continue to unfold? Would you help us get with wisdom? Would you give us that? Would you help us understand what it is we're studying as we go through these chapters? It's in the name of Jesus we pray. Amen. Okay, so real quick recap. We've had some issues with Jacob and Laban, have we not? Some deception. We've had some just like strife. Jacob has worked for Laban for, at this point, we're going to learn to spend about 20 years. That's a long time to work for your father-in-law. That's rough. And Jacob, as we're going to see, is going to remember the story slightly different than it actually happened, which we all tend to do when we are trying to paint ourselves in a better light. So let's take a look real quick at the beginning of chapter 31. It says this: Jacob heard that Laban's sons, i.e. his brothers-in-law, were saying, Jacob has taken everything our father owned and has gained all his wealth from what belonged to our father. And Jacob noticed that Laban's attitude toward him was not what it had been. Again, family drama, okay? His brothers-in-law are saying, hey, this outsider who married into the family is better off than we are. And we are actually our father's real sons. This is not good. Jacob catches wind of this and says, then the Lord said to Jacob, go back to the land of your fathers and to your relatives, and I will be with you. This is great. God is speaking to Jacob. We've been kind of waiting for something to shock the system, because for a while we've just been, Jacob's just kicking it with Laban and now his 2 wives and his children and these flocks. And we haven't heard a lot about the Lord. We haven't heard a lot about going back to Canaan. It's been dry. And so the Lord speaks to Jacob and says, it's time to go. It's time to go. So Jacob sent word to Rachel and Leah, his wives, to come out to the fields where his flocks were. He said to them, I see that your father's attitude toward me is not what it was before, but the God of my father has been with me. You know that I've worked for your father with all my strength. Yet your father has cheated me by changing my wages 10 times. However, God has not allowed him to harm me. If you remember back a few chapters, Laban asks Jacob to set his own wages. So Jacob is going to start kind of twisting the narrative ever so slightly so that he looks a little bit better than he actually is, which again is true to form. True to form for him, okay? Just because he's one of kind of in the great line of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob doesn't mean he's blameless, doesn't mean he's all that great even. He's not a good guy. He's just not, okay? So he starts kind of twisting it. And then we get this whole thing about the sheep, about the breeding of the goats again. I'm not going to go into all this. It's too many. It's goats mating, and it's all, if they're speckled, are they striped, are they plain, or whatever it is. So he recounts that whole scenario from chapter 30 to cast himself in a more favorable light. Then we get this, in verse 11. The angel of God said to me in a dream, in the dream, Jacob, I answered, here I am. And he said, look up and see that all the male goats mating with the flock are streaked, speckled, or spotted, for I have seen all that Laban has been doing to you. So again, Jacob is kind of rehashing chapter 30 with a version of events that doesn't actually happen in chapter 30, okay? So he's saying, the Lord did this, where it's no, Jacob was kind of tricky about it. So now he's the Lord did these things. I am the God of Bethel, this is verse 13, where you anointed a pillar and where you made a vow to me. Now leave this land at once and go back to your native land. Then Rachel and Leah replied, do we still have any share in the inheritance of our father's estate? Does he not regard us as foreigners? Not only has he sold us in marriage to Jacob, but he has used up what was paid for us. Surely all the wealth that God took away from our father belongs to us and to our children. So do whatever God has told you to do. Jacob, in some ways, of course, yes, God has apparently spoken to him and said, go back home. But that's all that we get earlier in the chapter that God tells him to do. So Jacob, perhaps, again, this part is slightly speculative, but roll with me for a second. Jacob is going to have to convince his wives to go with him, to leave their home and their father and their brothers and all the people around them and go with him. So what does he do? He starts painting their father in not a great light. He paints their relationships with them in not a great light. He starts telling them more than maybe what God told him. And so they begin to pose questions to themselves regarding, hey, what are we actually getting out of staying here? Not a whole lot. Our father basically sold us in marriage to this guy who it seems to have worked out well, but our father is not treating him well anymore apparently. So let's get out of here. So they reason with themselves and they get ready to go. Then, verse 17, Jacob put his children and his wives on camels, and he drove all his livestock ahead of him, along with all the goods he had accumulated in Paddan Aram, to go to his father Isaac in the land of Canaan. When Laban had gone to shear his sheep, i.e. he's out in the fields for quite a long time, Rachel stole her father's household gods. Moreover, Jacob deceived Laban the Aramean by not telling him he was running away. So he fled with all he had, crossed the Euphrates River, and headed for the hill country of Gilead. Jacob, once again, ever the deceiver, deceives. He leaves his employer, who's also his father-in-law, who's also the father of his wives, obviously, and the grandfather of his children, and he just hightails it out of there. He loads up the camels, he loads up the flocks, and he just leaves. He doesn't end things well. He doesn't act responsibly. He just leaves. Simply because, according to him, Laban hasn't been treating him as well as of late. And not only does he just leave, his wife, Rachel, who is again the favorite of the wives, perhaps the more beautiful, but the one who has only been able to have one child, as opposed to her sister Leah, who's had several, and this has created some familial strife again, right? Rachel steals her father's household gods. Now, to us, this might sound strange. It probably should. We don't, hopefully, have household gods. If you do, please come talk to me after this. These are, in Hebrew, it's the teraphim. That's what they're called. These are statues. They can be quite small. They can be, tiny, or they can be quite large. These are apparently smaller because she's able to steal them and hide them like in a rucksack, essentially, in a saddlebag. So she goes into her father's home, tent, whatever it might have been, and she steals these little tiny images. Now, these images might be a couple of things. They might be representations of ancestors that have died, family members that have died. Okay, that's option number one. That was practiced throughout the ancient Near East. It also might be, and this is not it was this or this, it could be a both and. It was also common to have little images of the gods that you worshipped in your house. This was for the purpose of divination. You would consult the household gods about major life decisions, about the crops, about things of that nature, and they would respond, give you answers, help you decide what to do, right? They were also important when it comes to things like fertility. So might not Rachel, who has had issues with infertility, be interested in taking the household gods? If they give wisdom through divination, and if they might help with infertility, she takes them. A few other things to note about them. These are, again, placed in homes, or they're actually placed in a shrine to the deity. They kind of live in the shrine. Let's look at three other places where this word teraphim, these household gods, shows up in the Old Testament. It helps us reinforce what these are, because this sounds strange to us. And they're going to come up again in the next chapter. So if you look at 2 Kings 23:24, 2 Kings 23:24, this is when young King Josiah, the young king in Israel, is he in Israel or in Judah? I just went completely blank. I don't remember right now, and I don't want to tell you incorrectly. He's king of one of those places, and I don't remember which one. Anyways, he's young, and he's the one who realizes, oh dear, we have not been keeping the law. Remember, they bring him the scroll, he reads it, and he weeps because he's like, God's people have not been doing this. And he sets up these reforms. He begins to tear down altars to other deities, etc., right? So 2 Kings 23:24 says this. Moreover, Josiah, the king, removed the mediums and the diviners and the teraphim and the idols and all the abominations that were seen in the land of Judah. There it is, in Judah and in Jerusalem, that he might confirm the words of the law which were written in the book that Hilkiah, the priest, found in the house of the Lord. So Josiah, as part of his reforms, he's a good king. He says we must get rid of these things: idols, the shrines, the teraphim, which are the household gods, which is the same word we get here in Genesis. So that's place number one. The second one is Ezekiel 21:21. Ezekiel 21:21. This is in reference to the king of Babylon. How the king of Babylon uses teraphim for the practice of divination. Okay? So Ezekiel 21:21 says this. For the king of Babylon stands at the parting of the way, at the head of the two ways. What's he going to do? To use divination, he shakes the arrows, he consults the teraphim, he looks at the liver. These are ways, odd as they may sound to us, that people would at the time seek information and answers. They would do things with liver from animals. They would use these teraphim, these household gods. They would shake the arrows and kind of throw them out and see which way they fell. And it's like reading tea leaves, essentially. It's the practice of divination, which the Israelites are told not to do. They're told not to take part in that. Moses mentions this in Deuteronomy. Okay, the third place that we see what these kind of teraphim, these household idols or gods are used for, is Zechariah 10:2. Zechariah 10:2 says this. For the teraphim, the household gods, speak iniquity, and the diviners see lying visions and tell false dreams. They comfort in vain. Therefore, the people wander like sheep. They are afflicted because there is no shepherd. These household gods that you use for divination that might bring about fertility, that might help you know what to do if you're to go right or left, etc. The Bible says they tell lies. They might give you some information, but overall, it's wrong information. It's not from God. It's half-truths at best, and you should stay away from these things. So this is what Rachel steals. It's not just that she steals little idol images from her father's household that he would somehow worship. No, these have some idea of purpose, as it were. They hold some importance for the family. If you're consulting these things to help you decide what to do in major life decisions and all of a sudden they're gone, this is a big deal. So of course, in the next chapter, Laban, also being frustrated and angry that Jacob has left in the dark of night, he's also angry that the household gods have disappeared. That's why. It's because they're kind of integral to the life of this community, okay? Continuing on into chapter 31, verse 22, Laban begins to pursue Jacob. Takes him several days, but he eventually catches up. And he basically goes, dude, what gives? He's like, what on earth are you doing? Why would you just flee in the middle of the night? What have I done to you to deserve this? But before he gets there, God meets Laban and tells him in verse 24, be careful not to say anything to Jacob, either good or bad. Which you're like, how do you have a conversation then? There's neither good or bad. What am I supposed to talk about? This may or may not be perhaps God kind of warning Laban, hey, remember, Jacob's a deceiver. He can twist your words. So you don't need to say anything overly or things overtly or things that are super important. Just get in there, get out. So Jacob pitches his tent. Laban overtakes him. And then verse 26, then Laban said to Jacob, what have you done? You deceived me, which again, we should not be surprised. That's literally his name. And you've carried off my daughters like captives in war. Why did you run off secretly and deceive me? There it is again. Why didn't you tell me so I could send you away with joy and singing to the music of timbrels and harps? You didn't even let me kiss my grandchildren and my daughters goodbye. You have done a foolish thing. I have the power to harm you, but last night the God of your father said to me, be careful not to say anything to Jacob, either good or bad. Now you have gone off because you long to return to your father's household. But why did you steal my gods? There it is again. He's frustrated, of course, that Jacob has left, but this frustration is twofold. One, why did you deceive me and leave? And two, when you were deceiving me and leaving behind my back, did you steal from me? It kind of reminds us a little bit of what Joseph is going to set up with his brothers when he slips the cup in their pack and sends them on the way. And they're like, we didn't deceive you. And he's like, yes, you did. You stole from me. And they didn't know that they did. Because what's going to happen is Jacob is going to say, I did not take your household gods. No one in my camp took your household gods. Search everywhere. And if you find them, you can kill the person that has them. Jacob does not know that Rachel has them. So the deceiver has yet again been deceived by his wife. Remember, Laban deceives him, forces him to work 14 years to marry Rachel when the agreement was 7. They go back and forth, Jacob and Laban do, deceiving each other, and now Jacob is deceived by his wife, unbeknownst to him. So, verse 31, Jacob says, I was afraid. Let me pause there for just a second. We do a lot of things out of fear. You read the Bible. What do Adam and Eve say when God searches for them in the garden? Adam says, I was afraid, so I hid. Jacob says, I was afraid, so I ran. We get this over and over and over again. All throughout the Bible, people are doing things because they are afraid. And generally speaking, the phrase or the story that follows the phrase, I was afraid, so it's not a super good reason. It's not a super good story. It holds maybe some pain. It holds some bad decision making, whatever it may be. But generally the phrase, I was afraid, so I did X, Y, and Z, does not pose a valid reason for doing X, Y, and Z. And Jacob is about to find that out. He says, I was afraid, because I thought you would take your daughters away from me by force, which he wasn't going to do. But if you find anyone who has your gods, that person shall not live in the presence of our relatives. See for yourself whether there is anything of yours here with me, and if so, take it. And then, of course, now Jacob did not know Rachel had stolen the gods. So Laban, and this is going to become an important turn of phrase here in a second. So Laban went into Jacob's tent, and into Leah's tent, and into the tent of the 2 female servants, but he found nothing. After he came out of Leah's tent, he entered Rachel's tent. Now Rachel had taken the household gods and put them inside her camel's saddle and was sitting on them. Jacob searched through everything in the tent, but found nothing. Rachel said to her father, "Do not be angry, my lord, that I cannot stand up in your presence. I'm having my period." So he searched, but he could not find the household gods. The language used here for Laban looking and searching for the household gods is that he's touching things. That's the language in the Hebrew. He's touching things. He's trying to grasp things. It's the same language that's used when Jacob goes to deceive Isaac and puts the hair on his arms that resembles Esau, and Isaac reaches out to touch him. And he deceives him. So Laban is deceived by his own daughter. Everyone is deceiving everyone. This is not good. This is not like, these people need a family therapist. This is not going well. She deceives her father. She hides them. She does the one thing. She tells him the one narrative that's going to get her off of showing him respect and standing up and him searching stuff that she's sitting on. She is saved from that, and she deceives him again. Again, this is not a model to follow. One of the hardest things for sometimes, this is not a good example because hopefully we realize pretty off the bat that this is not good. But one of the hardest things sometimes when you teach the Bible is to explain to people that there's a difference between when the Bible is descriptive and prescriptive. Sometimes the Bible is just describing something. It is not prescribing that you do those things. Sometimes it's just describing something. The Bible is not always telling you things in a prescriptive way, being, hey, you should do this too. I'm prescribing to you that you do these things. Thankfully, hopefully, this is one of the places where we realize, oh, this is descriptive, not prescriptive. But this is not good. Things are not going well. So, long story short, to end this chapter, Jacob and Laban decide to make a covenant between them. They do that, and that's the last we hear of Laban. And some of us we're just like, good riddance. That relationship needs to fizzle out. We need to move on. It has not been good for the most part. So, Jacob and Laban, at the end of chapter 31, they make a covenant. Laban leaves, and then chapter 32 opens with this. Jacob also went on his way, and the angels of God met him. When Jacob saw them, he said, "This is the camp of God." So he named that place Mahanaim. Jacob sent messengers ahead of him to his brother Esau. Remember, he's got to get through Esau now. The one he deceived, the one who was mad enough to kill him, the one who is the reason that he had to flee to Laban in the first place. And he hasn't spoken to Esau, and he doesn't know, are we still in troubled waters here? What's going to happen? So he sends messengers to Esau in the land of Seir, the country of Edom. This is what he tells the messengers, verse 4. "This is what you are to say to my lord Esau. Your servant Jacob says, I have been staying with Laban, and I have remained there until now. I have cattle and donkeys, sheep and goats, male and female servants. Now I am sending this message to my lord that I might find favor in your eyes." When the messengers returned to Jacob, they said, "We went to your brother Esau, and now he is coming to meet you with 400 men. And you're like, so was that a yes or a no? Was that received well or was that received poorly? It's ambiguous. Jacob is now terrified. His brother is coming at him with 400 men. Jacob not only has himself, but he also has his wives, his children, everything he owns in a very indefensible position. This is jarring for him. Verse 7, in great fear and distress, of course, Jacob divided the people who were with him into two groups. or camps, 2 camps. And the flocks and herds and camels as well. He thought, if Esau comes and attacks one group, the group that is left may escape. Then Jacob prayed, O God of my father Abraham, God of my father Isaac, Lord, you who said to me, go back to your country and your relatives, and I will make you prosper. I am unworthy of all the kindness and faithfulness you have shown your servant. I had only my staff when I crossed this Jordan, but now I have become 2 camps. Save me, I pray, from the hand of my brother Esau, for I am afraid he will come and attack me, and also the mothers with their children. But you have said, I will surely make you prosper and will make your descendants like the sand on the sea, which cannot be counted. Jacob spent the night there, and from what he had with him, he selected a gift for his brother Esau. 200 female goats, 20 male goats, 200 ewes and 20 rams, 30 female camels and their young, 40 cows and 10 bulls, and 20 female donkeys and 10 male donkeys. That's a lot. Think about, that's just a small selection that he picked out that Esau could have. So he has a bunch more with him as well. That's a lot of animals. That's a lot of animals. He put them in the care of his servants, each herd by itself, and said to his servants, go ahead of me and keep some space between the herds. He instructed the one in the lead, when my brother Esau meets you, when he meets you and asks, who do you belong to and where are you going, and who owns all these animals in front of you, then you are to say, they belong to your servant Jacob. They are a gift sent to my lord Esau, and he, Jacob, is coming behind us. Do you remember how when Rebekah was pregnant with Jacob and Esau, with twins, right? And they're struggling inside of her, and then they're born, and Jacob is grasping at Esau's heel. And there's this little verse in there that says something to the effect of the younger or the older will serve the younger, right? The older will serve the younger. We are seeing this kind of paradoxical shift in that, because multiple times in this passage and in what we're about to read, Jacob is going to refer to Esau as my Lord, which was a honorary, lowercase l kind of term. And he's also going to refer to himself as your servant. He is humbling himself, realizing his very lacking position here. He has no bargaining chips on the table at all. Esau is clearly well off. He's coming at him with 400 men that he easily was able to put together. Esau is not hard up and in need of those camels and the goats and the sheep and everything. And so Jacob is reduced to humbling himself, and we're going to see even bowing before Esau and declaring that he will serve him, which again is kind of this paradoxical shift in the story that we weren't quite expecting when things got kicked off initially. But Jacob, through his continual deceit, through his continual bad decision making, has made it thus. He sends all this ahead. He tells them, hey, give them to Esau. Verse 19, he also instructed the second, the third, and all the others who followed the herds. You are to say the same thing to Esau when you meet him. And be sure to say, notice it again, your servant Jacob is coming behind us. Why? For he thought, I will pacify him with these gifts I am sending on ahead. Later, when I see him, perhaps he will receive me. So Jacob's gifts went on ahead of him, but he himself spent the night in the camp. So, rather than just owning it and kind of being a man about it, he tries to pacify Esau. He says, if I could just keep sending him wave after wave after wave of gifts in the form of these animals, which were not a small amount again, and were not a cheap thing, if I can pacify him rather than just dealing with it myself, I'm going to send my servants into these 400 men who look like they're ready to fight. I'm just going to send them ahead and try to pacify him. Again, he's not coming out of this looking great. Tricky, wily, maybe, but he's not coming out of this looking like a strong leader. Looking like someone who's able to just kind of be like, here's the plan. I'm going to go deal with this. Here's what we're going to do. Verse 22, that night, Jacob got up, took his 2 wives, his 2 female servants, and his 11 sons, and crossed the ford of the Jabbok. As he had sent them across the stream, he sent over all his possessions. So Jacob was left alone, and a man wrestled with him until daybreak. When the man saw that he could not overpower him, he touched the socket of Jacob's hip so that his hip was wrenched as he wrestled with the man. Then the man said, "Let me go, for it is daybreak." But Jacob replied, "I will not let you go unless you bless me." The man asked him, "What is your name?" "Jacob," he answered. Then the man said, "Your name will no longer be Jacob, but Israel, because you have struggled with God and with humans and have overcome." Jacob said, "Please tell me your name." But he replied, "Why do you ask me my name?" Then he blessed him there. So Jacob called the place Peniel, saying, "It is because I saw God face to face, and yet my life was spared." The sun rose above him as he passed Peniel, and he was limping because of his hip. Therefore, to this day, the Israelites did not eat the tendon attached to the socket of the hip, because the socket of Jacob's hip was touched near the tendon. You guys remember that awkward thing we had to talk about and read when Abraham looks around and notices that there's no one for Isaac to marry, and so he sends his servant to go find a wife, and he makes his servant swear by placing his hand under his thigh, and we talked about how it wasn't his thigh. Remember that awkward conversation we had to have? Same thing here. Same language here. It's not his hip. It's not his hip. It's not his hip. This is where Hebrew and English translations are like, oh, we'll shield them a little bit. It's not his hip. This is more likely a blow to his fertility, for his ability to produce offspring. And of course, yeah, you're going to walk with a limp. Okay, so anyways, just tidbit of information there. Aren't you glad you came to church this morning? So Jacob sends his wives and his servants and the rest of his stuff, and he kind of like moves them over, and then he stays on the other side for reasons we know not. And then this man, who he doesn't know, comes out of nowhere, and they have a wrestling match, apparently all night long, and then this man has to leave in the morning, and Jacob will not let him go. And all this man has to do is inflict this, what seems to be quite easy pain on Jacob, and then things are over. This is a weird story. This is a weird story. We're like, it feels really tame or we kind of title this, Jacob wrestles with the angel, Jacob wrestles with God. Often throughout Genesis, of course, we've seen God appear. He appears to Abraham. Remember the whole Sodom and Gomorrah thing where the 3 men appear, Abraham feeds them, 2 go on ahead to Sodom and Gomorrah, 1, God stays back. And Abraham has this whole dialogue, hey, if there's 10 righteous people, if there's 20 righteous people, and God's like, okay, sure. So God appearing, or something that in the text is designated as the angel of the Lord, is often God himself. So Jacob wrestles with God, which seems quite fitting in a very poetic kind of way, does it not? That this deceiver, this trickster, this just guy who cannot get it together at all. His whole life has been him deceiving, him being deceived, him working forever and ever in a land that's not his home. It seems fitting for him to then have to wrestle with God and have to go through some form of, again, this is almost poetic, painful transformation to become a new person or become a different person or a person who is capable of making decisions contrary to the ones he's been making his whole life. And that's exactly what happens. God changes his name. He gives him a new name, this is of course the etymology where we get the origins of Israel, both as his proper name and then it's going to become the name of the nation. God had to step in and fundamentally change something about who Jacob was and how he interacted with the world and how he's about to interact with his brother and how he's going to be. And again, we're going to see he still struggles a little bit, but God has to step in and fundamentally shift something in Jacob's life. In order for things to proceed, for the story to hold together, God once again does what God has been doing since Genesis, and he intervenes. God is not far off. He's very involved in the whole of history. So he steps in. Jacob then walks with a limp, again, understandably. And now he has to face his fear. Verse 1 of chapter 33, Jacob looked up, and there was Esau. Oh no, coming with his 400 men. So he divided the children among Leah and Rachel and the 2 female servants. He put the female servants and their children in front, Leah and her children next, and Rachel and Joseph in the rear. Once again, he's working the system. He's going to go face it, but he orders not only his servants and then Leah, his second most loved wife, and then Rachel's first most loved wife. He also orders the children, which is, doesn't leave a great taste in your mouth. But here we go in verse 3. This is where we start seeing it. He himself went on ahead, and we're like, thank the Lord. Finally, some initiative from this man. Finally. He is doing what is right. He is going on ahead, and what does he do? He bowed down to the ground 7 times as he approached his brother. Let me pause right here. It always has intrigued me. The text doesn't say it, but it says it a few verses earlier. He's walking with a limp. Okay? He's clearly not set up to have any sort of military victory here, both himself and the fact that he's got women and children with him. He's in no position to engage in any sort of scuffle. He's bowing to the ground, more than likely kind of grimacing and struggling to get back up 7 times. 7 times. He walks towards his brother with a limp, and I'm just kind of convinced that Esau looks, and who knows, maybe Esau was set on some bad things. We don't know. But Esau looks up and sees his brother, who he has not seen in 20 odd years. So he's aged. He's got wives and children now. And he's limping towards him. Again, there's almost like this poetic kind of undercurrent to this story. Jacob has been fundamentally changed nary a few hours before. He's experienced a name change that again, names are super important in the ancient Near East. It's not just, I got married and I switched my last name and now I sign my signature different. It is something about you has changed. Internally, it has shifted. Your identity has changed. So he has a new name, and now he's limping towards his brother. And what does Esau do? Esau runs to meet Jacob and embraced him. He threw his arms around his neck and kissed him, and they wept. Then Esau looked up and saw all the things, the women and the children. Who are these with you, he asked. Jacob answered, they are the children God has graciously given your servant. Again, he refers to himself as Esau's servant. Then the female servants and their children approached and bowed down. Next, Leah and her children came and bowed down. Last of all, Joseph and Rachel, and they too bowed down. Esau asked, what's the meaning of all these flocks and herds I met? To find favor in your eyes, my lord, Jacob said. But Esau said, I already have plenty, my brother. Keep what you have for yourself. No, please, said Jacob. If I have found favor in your eyes, accept this gift from me. For to see your face is like seeing the face of God now that you have received me favorably. Again, remember, what did Jacob just do? He wrestled with God. He saw God face to face. He called the place Peniel because what did he say? I've seen God face to face and lived. He experienced the goodness of God and God's mercy and grace towards him. God didn't kill him. He wounded him, but he didn't kill him, and he gave him a new name. And now Jacob experiences Esau's forgiveness and kindness towards him, and he says, this feels the same way. You are acting like God to me in the fact that you're showing me mercy, right? Verse 11, please accept the present that was brought to you, for God has been gracious to me, and I have all I need. And because Jacob insisted, Esau accepted it. Then Esau said, let us be on our way, I'll accompany you. But Jacob said to him, my Lord knows that the children are tender and that I must care for the ewes and the cows that are nursing their young. If they are driven hard just one day, all the animals will die. So let my Lord, that's Esau, go ahead of his servant, while I move along slowly at the pace of the flocks and the herds before me and the pace of the children, until I come to my Lord, that's Esau, in Seir. Esau said, then let me leave some of my men with you. But why do that? Jacob asked. Just let me find favor in the eyes of my Lord. So that day Esau started on his way back to Seir. Jacob, however, went to Succoth, where he built a place for himself and made shelters for his livestock. So there's a little bit of deception here even. Jacob says, I'll follow you to Seir, you go on ahead, and then Jacob doesn't. We don't know why he doesn't. It seems that he still is a little afraid of Esau. We're going to see this after the death of his father especially. But he doesn't. He sets up camp. Verse 18, after Jacob came from Paddan Aram, he arrived safely at the city of Shechem in Canaan and camped within the site of the city. For 100 pieces of silver, he bought from the sons of Hamor, the father of Shechem, the plot of ground where he pitched his tent. There he set up an altar and called it El Elohe Israel, which means the God of Israel is mighty, essentially. So he buys land. Again, notice he is in Canaan. This is good news. We are finally back with having Jacob in Canaan. Again, remember, albeit, regardless of his faults and his deception and his ongoing kind of bent towards doing what is going to save him and doing what's going to set him up well and put him in the best light, he is still the one that God has chosen to carry the covenant, to carry the Abrahamic blessing. So you have Abraham, you have Isaac, you have Jacob, and Jacob needs to be back in the land for the story to continue. I tell people this all the time when I teach the Old Testament. Once we get to Genesis 12, which is Abraham, the first mention of Abraham we have, where God calls Abram at the time. He calls him, he says, I'll bless you, all these things, right? From that point on, the land itself becomes a character in the story. Metaphorically speaking, the land of Canaan, the promised land, becomes this kind of character that is either in the foreground or the background, even if we don't realize it, of the whole thing. The story is not going to move forward very far if Jacob and God's people are not in the land, because the land is a huge part of the narrative. You will be in this land, and I will bless you here so that you will be a blessing. The land is where this is going to happen. Not that God can't bless you if you're out of the land. He clearly blessed Jacob by giving him wives and making him rich, right? But the story is going to be pulled forward and is going to move forward in the land. That's how it seems to be set up. So for Jacob to continue the story, to truly become the patriarch he needs to be in the land. So God calls him while he's still with Laban and says, time to go. He makes some bad decisions on how to do that, but he eventually gets out and he ends up back in the land, which we've been waiting for several chapters now. He flees initially because Esau wants to kill him. Now he's back in the land because Esau has been merciful to him. The story kind of comes full circle in many ways. And we see Jacob, now wounded and walking with a limp, a slightly different character. And we're going to continue to see that he's better than he was. But even once we get into the story of Joseph, which is coming quite soon, we're going to see once again that the deceiver, Jacob, will be deceived. His own sons deceive him. They tell him Joseph's dead, right? So this is going to continue to be part of the narrative, part of the story. We're going to see that Jacob is going to kind of travel around. We're going to see that both Rachel and Isaac are going to die. And then we start, after you get through chapter 36, which is, again, one of those long kind of lists of people, then we get to Joseph. Because remember with me, we have Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Those are the patriarchs, but the story's going to have to continue. But again, notice, and you guys know this part, it's coming eventually. There's a threat once again to them being in the land. It's a famine. So what do? They have to leave the land. This creates problems. They're in Egypt. They're there for 400 plus years, right? So again, remember, as you read the Old Testament, it's really helpful to kind of keep in the back of your brain this idea that the land itself becomes this metaphorical character or becomes a driving factor for the story. They're in the land, which is good, or they're out of the land, which is bad. The land itself can play a role in how things are going. If they are acting appropriately in the land is blessed. If they're sinful in the land becomes polluted with sin and with idolatry and all those things, right? Which is why exile is such a big deal, because the land matters, right? Okay, questions, thoughts, comments about Genesis in general, what we read today, lingering questions from other weeks? Yes, Joy.
When Jacob tells Esau to go on ahead,
Yeah.
do Rachel and Leah and all the kids go with Esau, or are they staying with Jacob?
Oh, they stay with Jacob.
They stay with Jacob.
Yep. Yeah, when Jacob sends Esau ahead, Jacob's family all stays with him. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Good question. Yeah.
I mean, wives were not considered much more than property
Mhm.
back then.
Right.
So why would Jacob feel that he had to deceive Laban, or to see that for the conversation that, that I'm stealing these
Right.
two women? Well, they belong to him to begin with.
Yeah, he worked for them for 14 years. So, yeah. It's family drama. So why is Laban accused? Why is Jacob worried that Laban's going to take his daughters back? And why is Laban like, why did you steal my daughters? It's more of it seems to be maybe in some ways more of a respect thing. Like why? Like it's almost as if you stole them because you didn't allow for proper goodbyes. You didn't tell us you were leaving. You just disappeared. And so it feels like you have stolen from me, right? Jacob would have had control over Rachel and Leah in that way. Again, it's very patriarchal society. Wives are, in some ways, property. Of course, we're told Jacob does love Rachel, but in the end, like, he worked for her to earn her, essentially, right? And not in like a Hallmark movie romantic way. Like this is like a declaration of ownership type thing. So it's more of a how it looks on the surface. Like this doesn't sit well. Yeah. Yes.
I have a question. Because he left, that was wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Saying goodbye. However, was he concerned that Laban would go after him if he knew he would leave?
The text doesn't tell us that, let me get back there. It doesn't tell us that Jacob is worried about Laban not letting him leave, or that he's worried that if he does leave, that Laban's going to come after him. It almost is just like he convinces Rachel and Leah in like 10 through 16, hey, let me kind of give you this slightly false narrative about how things are going, because I'm going to misremember it myself. That's basically what he does. And he convinces them to get on board with leaving. And then they're like, okay, let's do it. And then the next verse 17 is, so he put them on camels and they left. So that we're not given any consideration on Jacob's part, really, where we get into his thoughts, where the narrator kind of tells us what Jacob's thinking, where he's like, okay, I have to leave in the middle of the night, or I have to leave secretly so that Laban, we don't get a ton of that. It does, I mean, just the nature of how he leaves, though, it does seem to indicate that he at least was afraid of some sort of bad interaction, or some sort of like troubling, rigmarole that he was going to have to jump through to leave, or there was going to be this discussion of, well, that's yours and that's mine, and those, 100 of those sheep are mine. Like it may have been more that, may have been more business related, that he was worried about having to go through the rigmarole of that, as opposed to him being worried that Laban wouldn't let him leave in the first place, or that Laban was going to come after him. It doesn't exactly tell us. We get a little bit of that with their dialogue at kind of the middle of 31, when Laban actually does catch up to him. But Jacob's real answer is, I was afraid that you would take your daughters away, not so much I was afraid that some sort of business transaction would go bad, or you'd come after me, or there'd be violence or anything like that, right? So we don't get into Jacob's head a ton about it. What else?
I guess when you think about before he was told.
Yeah.
Didn't notice his daughters and his
Yeah.
kids were gone.
Yeah, Laban's not told for 3 days that they're gone. So again, it may have been, remember, it may just be that they're super spread out. Because there's so much livestock. I mean, if you have a herd of several hundreds, thousands maybe of just sheep, notwithstanding the goats and the camels and the donkeys and the cows, right? They're spread out for miles. And again, remember, Jacob has to call Rachel and Leah to come out to the field that he's working. So he's not even like, he's like out in the bush, basically. Like he's out with the sheep, being a shepherd or overseeing, things out there. So sometimes these are like day-long travels, maybe even an overnight travel to get to where someone else is on this vast piece of property, right? So it may just be it took them a day and a half to get out there to realize Jacob's not there anymore, and a day and a half to get back to Laban to go, Jacob's not there anymore, right? And so they're really spread out. So that might be why. And of course, Laban catches up with him. We're told it takes him about 7 days. And of course, Laban is able to catch up with him because Laban isn't traveling with children or wives or all the livestock. He's just traveling with, a band of servants perhaps. But they're able to go much faster along the trail. So, yeah.
It's hard to imagine that, considering everything Jacob took with him,
Uh-huh.
that you could leave.
I know. How do you leave? Just even, okay, hold on. Like, just even if we consider only the things he tried to give to Esau.
Yeah.
Just traveling with that, which again is a tiny, tiny portion of what he actually has. So he sends all of this. Look again, chapter 32, starting in verse 14. 200 female goats, 20 male goats, 200 ewes and 20 rams, 30 female camels and their young, 40 cows, 10 bulls, 20 female donkeys, 10 male donkeys. That's just like a portion of all of what he's traveling with. So I don't know how he left again, the only way I can think of it in my mind that Jacob left and it took them that long to realize that they were gone is that they were just super spread out. Like super spread out in this like grazing pasture lands, watering holes, all the things, right? That's a lot. That's a lot. And all the children, right? Not only all the animals, but he's got all these children to keep up with. That's a lot. Like, can you imagine, like, just trying to go anywhere? Just pick either, like, the children, the 11 children, or, like, the 20, like, camels. Like, getting anywhere is going to be a bit of a difficulty. Like, you see, you're at the airport, and you're, like, trying to get on a flight, and you look over, and there's, like, a husband and wife, and they got, like, 4 kids, and they're trying to, and you're just like, oh, they're trying to, like, wrestle them onto the plane, right? Just traveling as a family of 4 or as a family of 5 is difficult. And so they're traveling as, like, a clan. Because not only do they have, themselves, but there's more servants than just the ones that he has kind of taken as concubines, essentially. There's a whole lot of household servants. There's other shepherds that worked for him, presumably. There's herdsmen and people who help with the flocks. The tents, you got to have people carry all that equipment, right? Yeah, everything. So this is not a small band of people. So they're not going to make super good time. But again, as we get with when he meets Esau, this is not a fighting bunch. This is not a military squadron. This is a family, and this is a household, essentially, right? They're not built for war. Anything else? Okay. We will continue on with more about Jacob next week. We'll get a little bit more information about some stuff with Esau. And then pretty quickly, we're making the turn toward Joseph, which for me, when I'm studying and reading and teaching through Genesis, always signals we're coming down the home stretch. Once you get to Joseph, you've kind of turned that last corner and you can kind of see the end kind of in front of you out there. So we're getting there, and we will get there by the end of the semester. So let me pray for us, and we will be on our way. Lord, thank you so much for time with these people this morning to study the scriptures and to look at more of how you continue to be gracious to people, even people who are deceivers and people who continue to mess up. God, we're grateful that you are close by and not far off in our own lives, but also just in the scope of human history and in your creation. Lord, would you be with us this week? In the name of Jesus we pray. Amen.